When I started Kill All Games, I didn't think for a second that my first few reviews wouldn't be positive. I will never lie when it comes to having a bad time, but over the years, I've softened my edge just a bit so as not to appear hyperbolic. Games are made by teams of people that deserve respect, even if the end result is poorly optimized, shoddily held together, and lacking in perspective. It truly pains me to say this, but Graven is all of those things. Similar to Wrath: Aeon of Ruin, I previewed Graven many years ago when I was still in games media. At the time, it was a bit janky, but I felt confident that developer Slipgate Ironworks could craft a title that did justice to Hexen, a game I never found all that playable. To my friend, I even jokingly said, Graven is like Hexen if it didn't suck. Some 4 years after its initial announcement, and I wish I never made that statement. To be clear up front, Graven is not the worst game I've ever played. There's some elements here that could be massaged into an interesting whole. I also really like its art style and setting. The guns can be fun, and its progression makes sense on paper. It's really everything else that either doesn't feel right, is janky beyond belief, or is simply broken. I'll do a quick breakdown of the plot for Graven because it might get some of you interested. The story starts with a rather scrappily edited cutscene that somehow managed to play back at a whopping 10 FPS on my PC, which explains how the main character was once a priest of the Orthogonal Order. He was exiled after retaliating against said order after they sacrificed his daughter. Years later, when the game begins, the priest takes a boat to the mysterious town of Cruxforth, and he begins his journey to hunt down 4 evil sects that are responsible for bringing plagues and desolation into the world. I wish I could comment on how this plot unfolds, but due to how buggy and unfinished Graven currently is, I couldn't finish the game. I'll be incredibly honest with all of you, I was struggling to even make it through the game. Navigation in this game is woefully inept, and without the aid of a map, which was actually in the early access release, you're routinely going to get lost. While that is part of the intention, the game even begins by stating reading comprehension is required. What ruins this clear authorial move is that a lot of the switches and doors in Graveland simply will not activate despite you looking straight at them. As for my problem, there's a known bug in the final act of the game where, if you somehow manage to perform actions out of order, the game will soft lock you out of fighting a boss and proceeding. Seeing as how it was the 12th or 13th time I had found myself lost and stumbling around for 20 to 30 minutes, I gave up. Graven is really not worth the effort to even figure out if I could surmount this error. If the game didn't have issues where you could inadvertently ruin your run, it still wouldn't be all that enjoyable. Everything starts fine enough by having you go into a sewer. You only have access to a staff at the start, but smacking zombies can be fun, and there are some immersive sim qualities that make the tinkering around enjoyable. I don't have footage of this as the game crashed and corrupted my recording, but I figured that would be a one-off bug. Oh, how naive I was. Anyway, once you clear up the quest in the sewers, you'll talk to the mayor of Cruxforth, and he'll task you with lighting the lighthouse to help ward off the zombies. The idea with Graven is that each act takes place in a central hub, where you travel out in one of the cardinal directions to go to your objective. It's a clever idea to naturally guide the player with organic level design, but most of Graven's environments look the same. It's hard to remember where you've been, where you're going, or what you've already interacted with. Compounding all of this is, as I mentioned earlier, the fact that switches, levers, and doors sometimes don't operate despite you meeting all of the requirements to open them. I can't tell you how many times I had already collected a key, walked up to a door, assumed I had the wrong key, then spent 20 minutes looking for alternate routes. A map could have helped with this, as it could tell me which door requires which key, or if I've already been through a specific area. There are no quest markers or anything of the sort in Graven, though. Your character will jot down information in his journal that is supposed to clue you into where you need to go, but will often be written so vaguely that you'll just have to wing it. A key example comes in the second act when you come across a lowered bridge. The text reads, "The bridge has been lowered. I must find alternative means." So it naturally points you to the path on the left. What you're actually supposed to do is jump down into the gorge and explore underneath the bridge to find a hidden cave. Why? NPCs in the hub towns are no help either. They will either not respond at all or repeat some generic line that has nothing to do with your quest. At points, the main quest giver will also disappear somewhere else, so it's not like you can even get peace of mind from talking to them. This is just a thoroughly frustrating game to make progress in, even when it is functioning properly. I could forgive some of these issues if the combat felt any decent, but Graven doesn't nail that aspect either. You'll pick up various weapons across your journey that, while themed like fantasy items, are counterparts to FPS staples. Your wrist-mounted crossbow is like a pistol, your larger crossbow is basically a shotgun, and the stake launcher can be compared to a sniper rifle. You also have access to melee weapons, such as the aforementioned starting staff, and some generic swords and maces. The weapons are creatively designed and they mostly feel good, but there are some fundamental issues here that prevent them from functioning correctly. When it comes to melee, it can be difficult to gauge the distance between foes. Sometimes you'll be right up on a zombie, but your staff will completely miss its swing. For the bigger foes that have swords, there is a timing discrepancy with their attack animations, so you'll take damage well before their weapon hits you. It makes reacting to their attacks a crapshoot, as you'll have to move in to close the distance and take damage before you even know what to respond to. The shotgun crossbow, though, is the most finicky of the bunch. It has a giant reticle to simulate its pellet spread, but sometimes your shots appear completely outside of that crosshair. I also ran into an issue where, upon using the secondary fire, the pellets stuck to the air in front of me and exploded in my face, killing me. This isn't even bringing up the one particular enemy that can still attack you after it's been killed, or how that same enemy will sometimes not die despite being set on fire and decapitated. I also have no idea what is going on with the animation for this strange stone-like foe in Act 3. It appears to have not been finished or is trying really hard to imitate what the Terminator looked like at the end of the first movie. With a lot of these complaints, the issues can be solved with patches from the developers. I understand COVID was a beast no one could have prepared for, and the goal to have Graven released in 2021 had to get pushed back regardless of how much work was finished. Still, how did the game go through 4 years of development to wind up like this? Even more baffling, Graven released in late January, and these issues are still here. I had initially sidelined playing the game because Like a Dragon Infinite Wealth came out a few days later, and I dedicated practically my entire February to finishing that. Graven was a complete mess at launch, but has seemingly gotten worse since. There has even been some new tweak where, upon death, you lose gold as if Graven is now suddenly a Souls-like. Why was that even implemented when basic issues such as your gun's not hitting targets remain? I'll also openly admit that I utilized some video walkthroughs to navigate certain segments here. Massive shoutouts to Zane Gaming. I think it's very telling that one of the only complete walkthroughs online has segments where the player gets completely lost. At the same point I broke the game in Act 3, that video even got stuck only to find a patch a week later had teleported him beyond the boss fight. I checked after the patch on April 10th, but no dice for me. At its very core, I don't think Graven is a bad idea. The game is essentially Hexen 3, and that's cool. The problem is that most of the design philosophy here is so rooted in 90s mentality that it forgets all of the advancements made over the last 27 years with regards to crafting levels or balancing combat encounters. Dusk wasn't such an amazing game because it copied Quake and called it a day. New Blood looked back at all the titles it loved growing up and bettered them. You know, that Dusk actually works. At some point in the future, I could see Graven becoming pretty decent. It will never be a New Age classic, but with polish and certain segments actually getting finished, this could be a fun enough game. There's even a co-op mode, so I could see that being neat. Until then, however, I'm not sure I would recommend anyone play this. It simply isn't in an acceptable state.